Alright, what's going on, guys? Hope you all are having a good day. So, as of Season 4 in Black Ops Cold War, some changes were made to the zombie health cap, and some adjustments were made to weapons over the season, and today we're going to be looking at the top 10 best loadout weapons to take into battle. These selections are going to be really good for taking into round-based maps like Overpowered or Toten. You can use these as you're playing the Easter egg or just for high rounds. These loadouts are also going to be very effective in Outbreak, although there are some different attachment selections that you can run if you're playing Outbreak or round-based maps that might cater towards that mode a little bit better. We're going to take a look at some of the general guidelines of what you can run on specific weapon types and what the best attachments are for those. And if you want to, just feel free to follow along the video and copy paste these loadouts into your class setups in Cold War. So anyways, this video actually did take me quite a while to record and produce and put together. So if you wouldn't mind dropping a thumbs up, that would be insane. If you're new to the channel, also remember to subscribe, as around 77% of my viewers are not currently subbed. If that happens to be one of you, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's completely free and it makes you literally 100 times more attractive. So we'll see how many people decide to change their life today, but without further ado, let's get into it. So coming today at our number 10 spot is going to be a loadout for the Krig 6 assault rifle. Now this is probably one of the more common weapons in the game and is a popular one that I see people running a lot. It's easily one of the most well-rounded weapons for zombies, and I'm just going to show you a very quick attachment setup that you can put on this. There are a few variations you can do, like for example, you can change the compensator over to a suppressor if you want to get a little bit more equipment if you're playing boss fights and that's something that you value. You can also change the laser sight to something like the Ember if you would like to get more salvage, but if you're just looking for a weapon that, you know, has sheer damage output, is easy to control, and is very effective, then this is the overall assault rifle class that I recommend. These attachments map very nicely onto the Krig, and overall, this doesn't have any weaknesses to speak of. Some of the other ARs in the game, like the Groza and even the QBZ, they've got a little bit too much kick, and it can cause them to feel quite inconsistent, whereas the Krig is an absolute laser beam in that regard. You're never really going to be missing shots or have to worry about, you know, bullets not hitting in close quarters scenario. It's not the world's most impressive fire rate, but it definitely gets the job done. This loadout is more catered towards round-based maps, but if you slightly adjust the barrel and also the laser sight, this can be easily translated over to Outbreak. But coming up next, we have the dual-wield Diamatis. Now, traditionally, pistols and zombies have never really been that good, and you would probably never think twice about running a pistol as your loadout weapon, but if you're using this particular setup, I'm going to go through all these attachments. I think that this will definitely surprise you. The important attachments here being the Task Force barrel to increase your damage, the actual laser sight as well to give you insane hipfire accuracy because they're really not that good on their own, and then of course it being dual wield. As it may be obvious, you already have a stellar movement speed while you're using these pistols, and the only really thing you have to compensate for is the hipfire isn't that good just on the base version of the Diamatis, but it gets significantly better with the laser sight. The extended magazine, it's really solid against hordes of zombies, but it's not particularly effective against armored enemies, and it doesn't seem like any pistol in the game really gets that done. You're going to need something a little bit higher powered for that, but in general, this can take care of virtually everything except like panzers and armored enemies. I will say, however, I don't really recommend these in Outbreak so much as round-based maps. Now, up next, we have the Carve 2 tac rifle. This, however, does translate much better to both game modes, but there is a general, like, consensus of the attachments that tac rifles run really well on. Now, there are some individual differences, like between this and the M16, which we'll get into, but in general, you can use this as a tac rifle attachment blueprint if you really want to, and where I think the Carve differs from the M16 is it doesn't really need the fire rate barrel. What it does need, however, is the magazine. I think it's pretty clear that the Carve 2 is much better than virtually any other tac rifle, maybe besides the M16. It's better than the AUG, it's better than the Mark 14 and also the Type 63, but when it comes to this versus the M16, honestly, I feel like to some degree it's personal preference, so if you like this better than the M16, then you can certainly run this attachment loadout on it, but it's good for literally any situation you put in. It's great for boss fights, good for round-based maps, and pretty solid in Outbreak. Something interesting to note is that tac rifles have a pretty big weakness, and one of those being their sprint to fire time, which is the amount of time between your sprinting and where you can actually shoot your weapon. However, you don't really need attachments to compensate for this, as tier 5 speed cola will allow you to shoot while sprinting, but that's only useful in some situations, so use with caution. Now, next up, we'll keep this one quick. This is a personal favorite of mine, the XM4, and I'm sure a lot of you guys really like this weapon as well. I remember a lot of you recommended the Farah assault rifle when it came out, and I actually really enjoy it for a couple scenarios, but comparing this to the XM4, I don't think it does quite as much damage over time as the Pharah, but this has significantly better control, which is an undervalued, like, attribute, I think, in zombies, and especially in Outbreak, if you're going to be shooting things at a distance or doing boss fights. I feel like the XM4 actually performs more consistently than the Pharah does. Hard to say if one is necessarily straight up better than the other, but I think it's case dependent, so you can translate either the class for the Pharah or the XM4 the same way. Coming up next, and taking the number 6 spot on this list, is a weapon I've actually changed my tune quite a lot on, and I think is viable in comparison to some of the other shotguns. This is the Street Sweeper, and I'll tell you exactly where the difference was made. With this newest release of Season 4 Reloaded, and the addition of Mule Kick, the Tier 5, I think, completely changes the viability of this weapon. Now, the biggest pain with the Street Sweeper is, of course, the reload. Like, it's absolutely disgusting. This can be mitigated to some degree through the right attachments, and this is what I generally recommend on the Street Sweeper, and this is for a few reasons. Typically, the damage increase helps out a lot, and also the magazine. That's one of the biggest things you can run on this. Now, where the difference is made with Mule Kick Tier 5 is the ability to reload your weapon in your back pocket and then use something else in the meantime is a complete game changer. If you pair this with a Wonder Weapon, you can completely dump all the ammo you have out of the Street Sweeper, and of course that, multiple second reload, you don't have to really worry about. You can swap to a Wonder Weapon, keep shooting zombies, and in the meantime, when you swap back to the Street Sweeper, it will likely be a full magazine again, so you pretty much have no reload time with this if ran correctly. I don't know if it's quite as specialized as like the Gallo or the Howler right now, but it is a lot more viable than it used to be if you do have Mule Kick Tier 5 right now. So certainly consider running this again if you haven't, as of Season 4, because it's completely changed its functionality now. But moving on, and coming up next is easily still probably one of inarguably the best guns in the game, the M16. Now, I'd say the best way to compare this, you ever know that one person in your life that's just like good at everything, and the crazy part is they actually deserve it too, and they really don't have any weaknesses? That's pretty much the M16. If you're referring to the loadout that we put on the Carve 2, this does map very nicely onto the M16, but I do recommend changing a couple of things whether you're playing Outbreak or round-based. It doesn't matter too much, but you can make a difference if you value things like salvage more, and that, is a lot more effective in Outbreak, we'll say. Gun in particular greatly benefits from the ability to sprint while firing, and that, is an absolute game changer in Outbreak, especially when you're fighting bosses. I think at this point, most zombie players know that the M16 is just literally the GOAT, but if you haven't mapped this particular loadout onto it, then I highly suggest you give this one a run and let me know what you think about it. Alright, coming up next, we have one that might surprise you a little bit, and I would bet that a lot of you players have not even used this one if you're just jumping back into Cold War, but this is the MG82, or some of you may recognize this as the Amelie from COD Ghosts. It's basically the same thing. Now, the MG82 was added pretty recently. It's the newest LMG in the game, obviously, but I would say it's by far the best for a couple of reasons. Honestly, it doesn't have the biggest damage overall. I still think that goes to the Stoner 63. What this gun does boast, however, over pretty much almost any other gun in the game, let alone the LMGs, is it has an unbelievably good hip fire. And this is going to be the general setup that I recommend on this, and you can capitalize on those strengths that it has as well by making the hip fire and the movement speed even better. The magazine is also pretty impressive, and I'd say it's pretty much cut out for anything you need it for. Basically, all of the LMGs have horrible hipfire in Cold War, except this one, and if you're not sprinting while using the hipfire, then you're pretty much doing it wrong. Once again, the damage isn't as good as you might imagine it, and you may not be able to one-tap enemies with this, but the fire rate is exceptional. The, hipfire is obviously amazing as well. So it has that really nice added benefit of the Mule Kick Tier 5, where you can pretty much reload this in your back pocket. Anything with like a large magazine that takes a long time to reload is going to greatly benefit from that perk, and I'd say that the MG82 certainly falls in that category. But moving on next, we have coming in at our number 3 spot, the Howler shotgun. And honestly, it's been a while since I would have rated this lower than the Gallo shotgun, but I think due to all of the new weapon changes and also the health rebalance and everything, and just the way that the meta has evolved over the past few months of Cold War, I think that this particular attachment setup maps very nicely onto the Howler, but I don't think it's actually the best choice anymore. It's still an absolutely amazing weapon, do not get me wrong. It's something that I recommend to virtually anybody who wants to play anything in Cold War ever. A lot of times this shotgun is best paired with wonder weapons, and especially if you're playing round-based maps where if you're playing boss fights and even an Outbreak where it isn't quite as effective for those things, it needs to be ran along some kind of secondary that compensates for its weakness, which is, you know, very quick fire rate and also its range. It goes without saying that it deals devastating damage with the right attachment loadouts, and then, you know, you can absolutely manhandle boss enemies with this, but you definitely need something in your back pocket as well that can make you not so vulnerable at long-range scenarios. But moving on from that weapon, and coming in at number 2 is one I bet you absolutely did not expect, and is something that's probably one of the biggest sleeper picks as far as weapons in this entire game. So coming in at our number 2 spot are going to be the dual-wield AMP-63s. These were also recently added to the pistol class. Now, on paper, really, these guns aren't anything special. You wouldn't even look twice at these if you're just looking at these statistics, but when you dual wield these and you put these particular attachments on it, it becomes something else. Like, it's literally probably one of the most broken guns in the game. Now, what makes this gun so good exactly? Of course, you want to dual wield it for its maximum effectiveness, but it's because it has the highest headshot damage multiplier, meaning that its time to kill is almost comparable to shotguns in close range. And of course, you have nearly 40 rounds per magazine. This gun is good for round-based maps. It's great in Outbreak. It even can single-handedly take down Legion using these guns alone. I'm not even kidding. Talked about the Diamatis a bit earlier in the video, but the AMP-63s are just an entirely different world. Like, it's not another level. These are in a different universe. And ironically, I think this pistol is one of the top 3 best weapons in the entire game, period. In general, I recommend running the attachments that I've shown, but based on, you know, if you're playing something super specific, you can, you know, cater it towards that particular event. But in general, these are, like, actually unbelievable. So if you haven't played them, I promise you, try it out and you will not be disappointed. Now, before we get into our number 1 loadout for Cold War Zombies, we have a few honorable mentions. First up, let's not forget the ever-faded crossbow. It's so strange in this game because it seems like the crossbow bolts have better bullet penetration than all of the snipers in Cold War, which is sad because it's actually true. The snipers did get a buff recently, but not so much that I can recommend putting them on like a best loadouts list or anything like that, but the crossbow, while you can't really put attachments on it besides like an optic, it is a really good weapon to use against Ordas. It's pretty effective against that, and even just regular zombies. And I don't know if it still has the same effectiveness as it did in Firebase Z a couple months ago, but otherwise it's pretty solid. Now, next up we have the ballistic knife. Pretty much same situation, other than it used to be really good on Ordas, but not so much anymore. However, it's still unbelievably effective in regular round-based maps. I don't recommend it so much in Outbreak, but if you add Shatter Blast to the ballistic knife, it becomes a beast. As strange as it might sound, if you're playing the solo Mauer or Toten Easter egg, I recommend using the Cerberus Wonder Weapon and a ballistic knife with Shatter Blast as the secondary. It sounds crazy, but I promise it works. Pretty much the only problem is I can't find a good use for the ballistic knife in Outbreak, right? It's pretty much relegated to round-based maps only. Now, up next, we have a weapon you might not even know was in the game because it got added at the, you know, release of Season 4. This is the nail gun. This is brought back from Black Ops 3, you know, a fan-favorite weapon, and it's pretty good against zombies, all things considered. You can't really add any attachments to it, but it completely changes the way it functions once it's pack-a-punched, and again, benefits from that Tier 5 mule kick, being able to reload in your back pocket. However, I will say, do not bring this into Outbreak because against Legion, you literally will lose. It just doesn't deal enough damage in that aspect as it should, but it's good against like regular hordes of zombies. However, it drops off pretty dramatically once the round, you know, cap gets up there. But otherwise, at least a really fun weapon to use. Now, coming in at our number 1 spot, the best loadout in Cold War Zombies right now, the remaining king. This has got to be the Gallo shotgun. It feels weird ranking this above the Hauer, as for such a long time, I was just, you know, I was fully endowed in the Hauerism, but I've converted back to the Gallo. It's not even a question at this point. This is by far the most well-rounded and cut-out gun for almost anything in Cold War Zombies. Where the Hauer does shine a little bit above this is, of course, the damage, and it takes a little bit longer for it to fall off, but at that point, you may as well just run a wonder weapon alongside that, and it doesn't really matter. With the new health cap changes and the way that guns work now, I think that this is the clear-cut choice of what you should be running in-game, and of course, the shotgun setup that we went over a little bit earlier is what I recommend you map onto the Gallo, and definitely try it out. It's great for Easter egg runs, it's good for high rounds, pretty much anything you throw it in besides like maybe the Legion boss fight, it can handle. So strongly recommend trying it out, and if you have any other suggestions of weapons that you thought should be on this list, definitely let me know in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, remember to subscribe as well, and I also stream quite a lot over on Twitch. If you don't follow me, link to that is in the description below. I'd love to see you guys over there. If you have the time, come through and say hello and just come chat for a bit, that would be great. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next stream or the next video. Have a good one. I gotta go. Peace out.